Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. Today we're working on Jim's car. We're going to work on some of the suspension components in the front. We've got some rack bellows to replace, and then I'd like to throw an alignment on this thing and maybe even put it up on the scales, but we're going to have to see how much time we actually have. All right, my plan today is to work on the front suspension of Jim's car. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get the rack bellows that we've got installed on the front of the car. So what we ordered is we ordered some Moog replacement bellows for a mid-80s Mustang 4-cylinder with a manual rack. And I've had pretty good luck in the past with these, getting them to go on to the Flaming River manual rack. The rack from Flaming River is based on that manual rack that was put in the Mustangs in those particular years. But sometimes you have to stretch these stock bellows a little bit to get them to go over. They're a tight fit. And so we may run into that here. I've had it in the past too with one of the other racks. What is it? Unisteer. Theirs tend to be a little bit smaller, and the bellows slide right on, and then you have to clamp down with, in this case, they came with tie wraps, plastic tie wraps, to clamp them around. But we'll see. I won't know until I, get the old ones off and compare them for size, and then start putting the new ones on. Either way, they're going on, they're going to fit, they're going to work just fine. It's been my experience that in the past, the bellows disintegrate before the tie wraps do anyway, so not a big deal. After that, what I plan on doing is working on the front alignment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a string and I'm going to tie it to something behind the tire. I'm bringing around the back side of the tire across the front, and then I'm going to bring it out here. I'm just going to hold it as steady as I can on the front of the tire, and then I'm going to measure front and rear to my string, trying to keep the string so it just touches the outside portion of the rear tire. All I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get the steering wheel straight. So I'm going to set the steering wheel in the straight position, and this is just a rough estimate. Rough estimate. I'll fine-tune it later after we put a couple of road miles on the car, and I'll drive it straight onto the lift, and then I'll make any adjustments that I need. This is just to center the steering wheel, because you can set toe, you can set the camber, the caster, and all that. It's just the steering wheel will be off a little bit, and so it gets kind of annoying. So doing the front end alignment like I do them with the Fast Track tool, this is just the way that I've found works best for me. I set a rough straight line steering wheel kind of measurement, and then I work off of that and I set everything else up. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that all the tires have the right pressure in them. I'm going to set ride height before I do my alignment, and I'm going to get a rough toe on the car either set or checked, because I don't know who aligned this or if it's ever been aligned other than someone eyeballing it, in their garage. So once I get that done, then I'll start working on the caster, the camber, and all that stuff. You actually have to work the caster and the camber together because every adjustment you make affects both. And so what I'll do is I'll set a rough camber. That'll be the degree and angles in the wheel goes at the top. And then from there, I'll start working on my caster. And I'm going to work it one side at a time. So hang on, I'm going to get this thing up in the air. I'm going to try to get the bellows changed out first, and then we'll see about getting the alignment done. All right, that was a lot more work than I initially intended it to be. On the passenger side, I didn't have any real problems. I pulled the outer tie rod off, and everything looked good. So I slid the rack bellows over, and it looks like they're going to work. They're going to be a little tight on the rack side. They go over the shaft for the inner tie rod, no problem. But I'm going to have to kind of stretch them out a little bit to get them to go over the inner, which isn't uncommon because we're not using, I think this is a Flaming River rack, so we didn't order them from Flaming River. So there are little discrepancies in between this and a standard Mustang rack, but I can deal with that. But when I got over to the driver's side, I started running into some issues. I couldn't get the outer tie rod off. And after exhausting about every other alternative, I went and grabbed a pair of vice grips out of my toolbox, and then I found evidence that I wasn't the first one here with vice grips. Some of those marks are mine, but I only clamped my vice grip on there twice. Once to put it on, or try to put it on, after I had taken it off. I had actually got it off. And so all those other booger marks on there, those chew marks, are from previous. Someone had tried to, put this thing on. My suspicion on what had happened, some of the threads on the start of the inner tie rod were mangled. They were bent over, and so as you tried to thread the outer tie rod on, it immediately started to get hard, and you couldn't turn it without having some means of holding the inner tie rod from spinning. But instead of addressing that problem, someone just threaded on until they got it close to where it needed to be, and they left it. So fast forward to now, I could not get that thing off. I had to wedge my biggest pair of vice grips on there and get it in a position where it wouldn't spin. And then I had to take a large crescent wrench on the flats of the outer tie rod to muscle that thing off. And it took a lot of effort in the beginning up until the point I got it spinning a little bit. So at that point, I determined that I was going to go upstairs, see if I had a couple of replacement outer tie rod ends, which I did, and I brought those down as a comparison to see if maybe they were different size. Maybe the wrong size got put on. And no, they're all the same size. So then I started looking closely at the threads on the very end of that inner tie rod end, and sure enough, that's when I found that some of them looked like they had, I don't know, it could have been, something in shipping when the rack shipped. It could have got knocked and it could have messed up those threads. But a lot of times what you can do is you can go in there and you can just kind of, take a flat nose screwdriver and a hammer and kind of tap them over and get them to kind of line up. And then, there's a number of ways to do it. But they were so boogered up now that what I ended up doing is I cut about 3/8 of an inch off the end of that inner tie rod, so that I could have a fresh set of threads going on. Now, I did leave a stop nut on those threads before I cut it, just so that I could thread it off and straighten out any of the threads that may have gotten messed up when I cut it. And then I sent the stop nut all the way back on, and I managed to put the outer tie rod in with no problem. Now, because of that, my front toe is, not my toe, but the car's toe is all messed up now. I've basically got to start from scratch. So I'm going to have to center the wheel and then measure and get it close and then go from there. But, these are the things that you run into. I wasn't planning on doing all this extra work to the car, changing out tie rod ends, but oh well, it's done. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and, since I'm in the front here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to address some of the wiring that's up in here. You can see I had to disconnect. This was just tie wrapped on before. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put some cushion clips on here. I'm going to redo some of this wire, maybe get some loom on it, make it look nicer. I'm probably going to leave most of this over here because of the way it is. I'm not going to get any more play out of it. And I think the more I try to mess with it, the more work I'm going to make for myself. So I'm just going to leave that. I'm just going to straighten up the stuff over here that's visible. And then I'm going to do the same thing over on the passenger side of the vehicle and get that done. And then once that's done, then I might think about setting a rough toe in on the front suspension. And then maybe tomorrow I'll do a front alignment on this thing and set it on the scales and scale it. And that'll pretty much wrap up the suspension portion of this car. And then I can move on some other stuff. I may not get to the oil pan right away. I may just end up putting the inline fuel filter that we got, putting that in, getting the hood put back on, because we still got the hood off from when we did the radiator. And then see where I end up time-wise, and determine what else we might be able to fit in this particular video. So I'll probably catch up with you guys tomorrow. All right, everybody, next day, let me show you what I've got going on. I got most of the wiring straightened out on the front of the car. I just couldn't leave well enough alone. It just looked like garbage, and I couldn't leave it the way it was. So back here inside the wheel well, you can see I've got everything strapped up with some cushion clips. I took all that excess that was over here and I moved it inside the foot box. And what we'll do is we'll get some tie wraps. We'll tie wrap it up inside there so it's nice and neat and out of the way. And all of this out here is now nice and neat. I even went to the trouble right here of dressing out the wires to the horn, because they were just the the raw wires, the insulated wires. And then I dressed out all of the wires here that go to the headlights and to the turn signals. Now, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I remember in these older Ron Francis harnesses, let me get the light kind of in here, they used to give you this connector, right? And what you were supposed to do, if you read the instructions, was combine the grounds here for the turn signals and the headlights, and then there's a good sized ground wire on the other side that goes back into the harness. That wasn't done. And so when this was all done, and someone put a weather pack on here in the middle of the turn signal wiring, and I know that because the wiring is usually about 18 inches long on these things. But so they ended up with this extra ground wire, and instead of tying it in like they should have, they made a bare spot here on the chassis, put a self-tapping screw in and an eyelet, and left it like that. And it's going to be fine. At some point, I've just got to let go of my OCD and just realize that it's going to work. The way it is, it's going to work. I'm just going to have to leave it that way. I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have done it the right way. I would have spliced it in, but rabbit hole, guys. So I got this done on both sides of the car, and I don't have the wheel off on the other side of the car. I'm not going to show you that, but I got into the alignment on the car today, and what I'm finding is that these sleeves that we got are a touch long, and we really don't have a choice. They went from like 3.5 inch long to 6 inch long. They didn't have any size in between it. There were 4 inch, but there weren't 4.5 inch, and which is what we really needed to use. And so we got, I believe, 6 inch, and they may be 5 inch. I'm going to measure them, but they're a little too long. And so what's happening? This is a manual steer car, and when I get my proper camber, that's the angle that the tire leans in at the top, my caster is far too much. So I've got almost 7 degrees of caster in it right now, and I'm out of adjustment. I mean, I can't take this any farther in. Now, I'd like to be somewhere around 5 or 5.5. I think that'll be perfect for a street-driven car. Even with the wide tires in the front, Jim's got the larger steering wheel in here, and so with that wheel, I think that's a 15-inch wheel. He shouldn't have any trouble parallel parking or anything like that. But on the highway, he's gonna be able to feel that it tracks straighter. It's gonna want to self-correct after turns better, and so I'd like just a little bit more caster built in than the 4 degrees that Factory 5 recommends. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull those adjusters back off. I'm going to take them over to the bandsaw. I'm going to start with 1/4 inch. I'm going to take 1/4 inch off of it and see if I can bring that in from 7 degrees of caster to 5 to 5.5. If I can, Then it'll tell me how much to cut on the other side. I'll just make both sides the same, and then I'll dial in the alignment. I've already set my ride height here. I started with setting the tire pressure. I set 20-pound front, 19-pound rear. That's for 17-inch tires. And once I've got my ride height set, then I do my alignment. After my alignment's done, then I can go back and I can do my corner weighting. And if there's any changes, if there's drastic changes that I have to maintain while doing my corner weighting, I will look back at the alignment. But if I'm only doing a turn or maybe a turn and a half on one corner in order to get my corner weights where I want them, I'm not even going to bother checking the alignment because I know it's going to be right where it's still, you know, needed to be. So I'm going to get going on that. I'm going to take this side apart, and I'm going to get this side all squared away, and then I'm going to work on the other side. I don't know if I'm going to show you both sides, but regardless, I'm going to get the alignment done, and then I'm going to try to get the side pipes back on this thing today. But I don't know. I may run out of time. It's already, you know, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I may just run out of steam and not get the side pipes on. But it's something I can do during the week after work. So I'll bring it back when I've got something more to show you. Yeah. All right, so here is what I ended up with. I ended up cutting, they were 5-inch sleeves that we bought because the sleeves that were on the car already were 3.5, and we were maxed out in the front, meaning we had hardly any thread engagement whatsoever. So ideally, 4.5 would have been perfect, but 4.5 aren't available. So we got the 5. And as it turns out, I ended up cutting 1/4 of an inch off of each side. So now the ones we have are 4.5. Now I did peek down inside. I grabbed a flashlight and I looked down inside to make sure that these things were threaded all the way in, and they are. They're threaded all the way into the portion where they bellow out in the center. And so I know we've got like 1 inch and probably 1/8 of thread engagement inside of each one of the adjusters. So here are the specs that we ended up with. And I haven't set toe in yet. I actually set toe in on this one yesterday because it was so far out because we had to replace the tie rod ends with the debacle we went through with the steering rack bellows that I was basically starting from scratch. So I wanted to get the toe in at least close before I started. And so I did that last night or yesterday afternoon and got it close. And I set it to 3/16 of an inch toe in, and I'll double check it now to see if it's changed. So we set a total of 1/2 inch of camber, and that is in relation to the top of the wheel being in farther than the bottom of the tire being out. And then our total caster number ended up being 5 degrees. So that is the degree at which the steering spindle is pitched back. So it's pitched back 5 degrees from center line from the upper and the lower ball joint. And that's going to give us a nice straight track. It's going to allow the car to self-center as you complete a turn. And one tip I will give you, if you're doing this at home, as long as you don't have these side vents in, now doing it on a completed car, generally that's not the case, and the rear splash shields, you can actually reach in here with your wrench to get the back one. And I was able to reach in up in the fender well through here to get the front one. And so I didn't have to keep climbing under the car. If you're continually jacking the car up, you're going to change all your measurements, and you're going to have to resettle the car. Now remember, I've got turn plates underneath here. These are made of Teflon. It's 2 sheets of Teflon. So that enables the wheels to turn really freely. See, like I can grab the wheel right here, and this thing will just turn out as much as I want it to. And it makes it a lot easier to do the alignment with those turn plates underneath there. Now what the turn plates also do, as the car is settling, it'll actually push the bottom of the wheels, or the tires, out. Because since they have camber and the suspension is settling, it wants to push the tire out. And so if it's rubber against the floor or it's rubber against the runway, it just wants to stick. And so the Teflon sheets allow it to push its way out like the car was being rolled into place rather than just jacked up and set back down into place. So I've got both sides done. Once I got the first side done, the second side was pretty pretty easy. The passenger side didn't go together as easy as the driver's side did. I don't know what it is about the driver's side. It's just like everything fell in place. And however much I tightened down the sleeves, both front and rear, to start with, I was really close. And so all I ended up doing was setting camber using the back adjuster, and boom, I was like right there. I was at 5 degrees, or I was like at 5 1/4. And so I just made some minor adjustments on the driver's side front, and it took no time at all. The passenger side just took forever. I was so far out with the adjusters on that side when I put it back together that I fought it for probably, what time is it? Probably for a half hour, 40 minutes, and before I got it to where it get close. And once you get it close, it's just creeping up on it, and little changes, because if you make drastic changes, you can swing far out the other way and then have to come all the way back to where you were. So, you know, quarter turn here, quarter turn there, and I was right in there once I got to that point. So it's done. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up all of my alignment tools. I'm going to jack it up. I'm going to tighten down all of the front suspension components. I'm not ready to grease everything for the final time yet, though. I'll probably do that once I start putting all the finishing touches on, putting all the front splash shields in and all that, because that's dirty work, and I don't want to get it all over everything as I continue to work on the car. And so if you get a little bit of excess grease on something and you're trying to push your hands in somewhere to get something else, you're going to get grease all over your arm, your elbow, your knuckles, and then it transfers to the paint, and it's a pain in the ass. So I'm going to wait, and I'm going to grease everything at the end, and then I think after I get everything cleaned up and everything tightened down, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to see if I can't get the side pipes put on today, and it'll start looking like a car again. And then during the week, I'm going to start putting the side vents in and stuff like that. But after I do the side pipes, I think I'll close this one out. All right, I figured I'd show you all of the wiring completed on the passenger side, since we didn't show that earlier. And then, of course, all of our hardware is now tightened down. So all of the pivot joints, which are these bolts here, all of the stop nuts on all of the locations are all tight now. And so we'll put the tire back on and lower this thing down, and then we'll probably work on getting the side pipes put back on. All right, little music update for you. That was Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train. So the side pipes are in, and they look pretty good. If you remember, we had to lower the engine down on this one because the stacks were making contact with the hood, and we weren't real comfortable with the engine when it was moving under acceleration and knocking into that hood. So we found no good reason that the spacers that were installed were put in to begin with. So we lowered the engine down. And while we did that, we also leveled the engine into the engine mounts. So it's level from side to side, meaning the side pipes have the same amount of ground clearance on either side of the vehicle now, where before it was high on one side and it was low on the other. It was actually high here on the passenger side. So as a consequence of that, our cutout on this side is a little bit larger than I would normally be comfortable with, but there's nothing I can do about it at this point. Side pipe alignment is good from side to side, and so we're just going to leave it alone. On the other side, because of where the header flange to side pipe connection is made, it needed a little bit of help. And so you can see it's real messy over here. I haven't cleaned anything up, but I had to give us a little bit more space up here because we were contacting the body right here. So through all of this, we've got the headers level now, and it's been a lot. It's been a lot of work up to this point. I did notice some things when I was under the car today, working on getting the suspension all wrapped up. I did make a bracket for the radiator tube, and if I remember on the next video, I'll give you guys a look at that. But I found that one of the stop nuts for the lower part of our steering shaft is missing its lock nut. And so therefore, without a second means of locking that in place other than possibly thread locker, which I doubt was used in this case because it wasn't used in a lot of other places. We're going to address that. I'm going to probably have to stop by the local hardware store, get a shallow stainless steel 1/4x20 nut, and that is what we'll use for a stop nut on that set screw, and that should wrap that up. I'm probably going to jump into the oil pan next. I've been putting it off and putting it off. I just dread it because I've just been getting so filthy working on this car, and yeah, so I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and get that oil pan going. It should be fairly clean because I did a pretty good job of cleaning everything up underneath the car. So we'll see. But I've got to get the oil pan dipstick in, and I've got to get it measured for the proper amount of oil in the pan and everything. So we'll see how things go. I'm going to close this out here. As always, thank you for watching. If you're enjoying the content, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, comment, and we'll see you guys all next time. Have a great day.